Well, welcome to video number 3 on blood. As you can tell, a pretty important part of human anatomy and physiology. In the last video, we were talking about clotting and coagulation and how the platelets come in and collagen comes in and tells these platelets to form and to clot and to stop, to form kind of these fibers that stop the blood from flowing. Somebody that does not have the ability to clot the blood, and could be a lot of problems there. It could be a problem with not enough platelets, could be a problem with the collagen that doesn't form. But somebody that doesn't have the ability to clot blood, they have a disease called, we say they're a hemophiliac, or they have hemophilia. So a hemophiliac is a free bleeder. Now, that's kind of interesting because that's a real problem, because if you get a cut on the outside of your body and you're bleeding, then you see that and you're trying to cover that up, and if you know you're a hemophiliac, that's a problem. You've got to watch that. But that's not the real problem for a hemophiliac. The real problem for a hemophiliac is a contusion or a cut inside or a place where you have a bruise. And a bruise is actually an area where we have a blood vessel, whether it's a capillary, whether it's an artery, whether it's a vein, that has opened up and blood is coming out, and we're not able to clot that. So when we see a bruise, we see the old blood coming to the top. The problem with the hemophiliac is they continue to lose blood internally, and that's really, internal bleeding is a major problem for a hemophiliac. So once again, hemophilia is the lack to be able to clot blood. Now, we use the word anemia, A-N-E-M-I-A. There's a lot of different kinds of anemia. Anemia is a deficiency in the blood. Something's wrong with the blood. This won't be on your test, but we should have something that your book talks about. Sickle cell anemia means that instead of nice round blood cells, they make a sickle shape. But when they say anemia, that means something is wrong, a defect in the blood, or there's a deficiency. For example, if you have a lack of dietary iron in this will be on your test. If you have a lack of dietary iron, you're not getting enough iron in your diet, then we call it an iron deficiency anemia. So what is the lack of dietary iron in your body? It's which type of anemia? It's iron deficiency anemia. Now, I want to talk to you about a really interesting cell. I want to talk to you about erythrocyte. It's E-R-Y-T-H, let me spell it right here for you, E-R-Y-T-H-R-O-C-Y-T-E, E-R-Y-T-H-R-O-C-Y-T-E. An erythrocyte is a cell with no nucleus. Now I'm going to come back to erythrocytes a little bit later, but we talk about how all cells have some type of either, plant cells have a cell wall, animal cells have a cell membrane, and then we talk about a nucleus. But an erythrocyte has no nucleus. So when I ask you on your test, what's the type of cell that has no nucleus, that's an erythrocyte. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. Now, I want to also talk to you about an abnormal increase in red blood cell count. Okay, so polycythemia, okay, P-O-L-Y-C-T-H-E-M-I-A, polycythemia. That is an abnormal increase in the red blood count. So a couple of these pages I put up to kind of help you with the spelling. So once again, let's look at a couple of words here. See where it says anemia. Okay. Anytime you see this suffix on a word, emia, same thing with anemia. All right. We're talking about, we're going to be associated with blood. So this is an abnormal increase in red blood count. So that actually tells us, when the body begins to make too many red blood cells, that something's out of balance. Something's wrong. There could be any number of things, and we hate to always say that's one thing, but that's a big indicator that there's a problem. What else is a big indicator that there's a problem is increased white blood cell count. So when we come in there and we look at white blood cells, and we look at how many white blood cells we have, all of a sudden we have an elevated number. It means our body's fighting something. So that's it's amazing. We can go in now and we can test blood, and we can tell a lot about what's right or wrong with a person based on their blood. We can look at the diet. We can look at the components of blood. We can look at how much calcium they have. we can look at the red blood cells, we can look at the white blood cells, we can look at the amount of water that they have. I remember I had to go in and they took some blood, and the lady said, "Oh, have you been sick very long?" And I said, "I haven't been sick at all. I feel great." And the very next day I had a cold. And what happened was the lady knew right away by the increase, all of a sudden my white blood cell count had started to rise up and started to go. And so she knew I was getting sick. And she knew I was sick before I knew I was sick. So that's pretty incredible. Let's go a little bit further. Let's talk about a couple of deficiencies here, okay? Because we're talking about anemias, okay? And so here's one, pernicious anemia, okay? P-E-M-I-C-I-N-S, anemia, okay? And this is caused by, let me just give you these. This is a deficiency in vitamin B12, okay? So once again, when we see the word anemia, then we're talking about a deficiency or something's wrong, okay? So this is what we get when we have a deficiency of vitamin B12. Now, vitamin B12 is really important for our immune system, and vitamin B12 kicks into effect the release of the antibodies into our blood. So if somebody is sick, a lot of times they will go and they will take a source of vitamin B12, and we say it boosts your immune system. Well, what does that B12 actually do? B12 actually comes in, and B12 increases the ability of our body to once it's found something out in the body, increases the opportunity for antibodies to be sent directly to that site, and that's the job of B12. Kind of interesting. So I've got a couple of other things here. Let me just give you these since I put that note up already. Blood cells, okay? Whenever we see the word hemo is hemo, like hemoglobin. Whenever we see the word heme or hemo, we're talking about blood, okay? So these are hemocytoplasts. And hemocytoplasts, you noticed in your book when you did your questions that they had a big picture in your book, and it started out of how the cells start out, and then they make different cells. So whenever we see the word, we're going to start looking at some big things. Hemo means blood, okay? Whenever we see this word blast, blast means that's a starting of something, okay? So hemocytoblasts are the beginning of all blood cells. So we start out making the hemocytoblast, and then they eventually make another cell, which makes another cell, which makes another cell, which makes red blood cells. So this is the start to all blood cells. And then I wanted to give you this last one because I was talking about B12. Now, B12 and folic acid, okay, are necessary for DNA synthesis, and we talked about that earlier, about how in order to make DNA we have to have protein, okay? Well, the DNA synthesis, we have to have B12 and folic acid. So DNA synthesis, we also have to have B12 and folic acid to make the red blood cells. So if you don't have enough B12 and you don't have enough folic acid, then your body wants to replace these blood cells every 120 days. So if you don't have enough oxygen in your blood, okay, if you don't have enough oxygen in your blood, we say you're anemic. All right? That's a deficiency of oxygen in your blood. You're anemic. Well, what could cause you to be anemic? A lot of things. But if you don't have enough B12 and you don't have folic acid, then your body doesn't make these new blood cells every 120 days, and it can't take the old ones and recycle them because you don't have enough, and pretty soon you have less blood in your body than the 5 liters you're supposed to have. And this is what we found out in malnutrition kids in other countries, like for example India and in some other countries of Africa, where people were starving, and they were going in and they were getting really. I don't know what we do. I don't know what we do with these situations because we're able to get them food, but we can't get them some of the good nutrients that they need. So they would literally have this. They would literally have these these large vats of crushed up flour and wheat, crushed up wheat to make flour, and they would mix that with water, and people would wait in line. I mean, it's still a common practice today, and people would wait in line, and they would able to get 2 fingers worth of this flour paste and go ahead and eat that, and then they would move on in the line, and there would be just enough food to feed thousands of people, and they would. So whether it was a baby or a mother or an expecting mother, whatever, they could go in and get about 2 fingerfuls of this wheat flour paste. Well, that was enough to sustain overall body metabolism for the day, but they don't have any vitamins, they don't have any nutrients, and so what happens is they become very anemic. And anemic, once again, they don't have enough oxygen. So we got to watch this. B12, folic acid. We're trying now to get people in countries that don't have the food. We have a multivitamin. You know, here in America, we're just so fortunate because